Hello and welcome to Mindful Living, where we explore the art of living with the intention, balance, and inner peace. I am Avik, your host, guiding you through conversations on health, meditation, mental well being, mindfulness, and the mind body connection. Each episode features expert insights to help you grow, heal, and thrive. So, take a deep breath, relax, and join us on this journey to a more mindful and fulfilling life. So, let's get started.
Welcome back, listeners, to the Mindful Living podcast with your host, Sana, where we explore the intricacies of human emotions, growth, and transformation. Today, we are diving headfirst into a topic we all wrestle but rarely talk about it: stuffing versus exploding. Where exactly do your heart feelings go? And joining us in this incredible conversation is Lindsay Carnick, LCSW, MSW, and ME, founder of Onward Psychological Services. Now, Lindsay is not just a highly skilled therapist. She's also a storyteller, a stress management wizard, and if you didn't already love her, a self proclaimed master of dry cereal consumption and fancy dancy egg sandwiches. Lindsay believes that our lives are shaped by the stories we tell about ourselves. And today, she's here to help us rewrite the ones that hold us back. So, whether you are someone who stuffs your emotions into a box labeled do not open, or you are an emotional geyser ready to explode, this conversation is your permission to slip, to feel, reflect, and grow. So let's unravel the stories, learn some practical tools, and start showing up as the most authentic, raw versions of ourselves. So let's dive in, listeners. So, Lindsay, welcome to the show, and it is an absolute pleasure having you with us today.
Thanks, Sana. It's wonderful to be here with you.
So, you have worked, Lindsay, with everyone from professional athletes to incarcerated juveniles. What are some of the most common ways people handle, or let's say mishandle, their heart feelings?
The most common way people mishandle or handle in a less than constructive way, I would say, is by judging their feelings. So most people, myself included, sort of have this internalized automatic response to assess our feelings, even as we're having them, as right, wrong, good, bad, justified, not justified, appropriate, inappropriate, all sorts of things. And that sort of judgment is a sticky wicket because we are then usually compounding some already tough feelings with some tougher feelings arising from that sort of judgment about whether we think we should or should not have those feelings.
Yeah, makes sense. So, before we proceed to the further discussion about the topic, what motivated you to explore about, the stuffing or exploding about hard feelings?
Well, my experience is both with myself and my own interior world and also other people's interior worlds is that most of us are struggling and engaged in this sort of chronic difficulty, which is wanting to be authentic, however we understand that to look or mean, and also wanting to play by a certain set of sort of social guidelines. We want to be authentic, but we also want to be nice. We want to be genuine, and we want to be honest. And most of us are pretty consistently bumping up against some friction between those two and find ourselves in this very interesting space where we feel forced to choose between the two. Either I'm authentic or I'm nice, because my feelings are not authentically nice. Yes. Or I'm cool, calm, and collected, which means I'm not being genuine because right now I'm really angry, but I have a value that says I should be cool, calm, and collected. And I believe that. And unfortunately, in this moment, it's incongruent with my internal world. And my observation is that friction, that tension between how we are experiencing something and how we want to experience it so that we can be the way we want to be is a source of great trouble for most of us. And I always thought it was very interesting how about 100% of people, myself included, can think of many, many examples of a time where for 1 second it felt really good to be 100% honest. But as soon as what you said was out of your mouth, you felt terrible, right? Instantly. You felt absolutely terrible. And so how can it be that we have this ongoing seemingly irresolvable struggle between the feeling goodness of authenticity and how sort of freeing and spacious that feels, but the feeling terribleness of having lashed out or having hurt somebody or having behaved in a way that, while it may have been an authentic reflection of how we were authentically feeling, also authentically inflicted damage on someone else. And that is not authentically who we are. So how do we sort of start to understand this ongoing conflict between how we're, quote, authentically feeling, but also what we authentically value about showing up in the world when those two things are not in congruence?
True. That's true. Very, very well explained. Very well, thanks for sharing this with all of us, Lindsay.
Sure.
So, what's the danger of constantly stuffing our emotions, and what are some warning signs we might be doing it?
Well, as the physicists say, matter can neither be created nor destroyed, right? And so there are a few other good physics axioms that apply, what goes up must come down, this sort of thing. And so the idea that, it's interesting to think about feelings. What is a feeling? You can't smell it. You can't lick it. You can't touch it. You can't toss it up and down like a baseball. Yes. A feeling is somewhat intangible, but that certainly doesn't make it real, or it doesn't make it not real, excuse me. So there's often this idea that because it's intangible, it's not really real. And because it's not really real, we can sort of wish it away, squash it away, suppress it away, and it will just go away because it wasn't real to begin with. And about 100% of people have experienced that as false, right? 100% of people have discovered one way or the other that your feelings, while they are intangible, are very real, and shoving them down or stuffing them or submerging them in one way or another may be a strategy that in some short-term sense gets something done for you, but those feelings have gone somewhere. They haven't just disappeared. And they come out in all kinds of ways, depending on a person's temperament and their histories and their present context. They come out in the form of self-sabotage. They come out in the form of explosive lashing out. They come in the form of passive-aggressive lashing out, right, which is a kind of quiet lashing out. I like to sort of describe it as there are usually two kinds of ways that suppressed feelings show up. People either lash out or they lash in. They either do damage to someone else or they do damage to themselves, or both. And those behaviors or patterns certainly can look like a lot of different things. But feelings, for all of their intangibility, don't just turn into digital dust. They are, in fact, real. And wanting them to be different than they are, or judging them as being not correct, never did anything. Quite frankly, in terms of lessening feelings, usually it makes them stronger. So, to your question about how do we start to notice when we are in some capacity stuffing our feelings, I would say, well, notice it's like playing whack-a-mole. When you whack something down over here, it pops up over there. Notice where strong reactions and responses are popping up, where it's probably disproportionate, getting snappy with people, getting short with people, becoming aggressive or even abusive towards people, whether that's verbally and hopefully not physically. Finding sometimes some people experience that as a feeling of tremendous numbness because you certainly can't selectively numb. So usually if you're pushing down one kind of feeling, you're pushing down most of your feelings. There's no way to pick them out and decide which ones to push down. And it becomes a little bit of a Pandora's box where people sense that if they allow themselves to feel one thing, they're going to feel all the things. And so they just don't.
Wow.
And then, of course, there's certainly people often look for overt ways of numbing, whether that's substance use or alcohol or overworking, anything that ends in ism, right?
Yep.
Or ick.
I agree. So on the flip side, what happens when we explode, and why do some people default to that response?
Well, there are probably multiple reasons why people have an explosive response. And that could range from a sense that they have to get a release from what is creating internal pressure, and the opportunity arises in which they feel justified to do so, and so they do. Most people, well, I don't know if I'd say most people, many people sort of don't explode until they're in a situation that can sort of be identified as well, it's understandable that, or we can sort of wrap our arms around it, right? Like, okay, I understand why that person went off. But for them, it's become an acceptable outlet, right? Whereas other outlets might be unacceptable. Of course, it's, exploding is rarely helpful or acceptable. But certainly some conditions seem more sort of understandable and justifiable than others, perhaps. Other people simply become highly irritable, which is a kind of explosiveness, right? That's small, frequent explosiveness. In general, I think people who are trying very diligently to stuff some feelings are working very hard at that on a regular basis, and they get exhausted. You can sort of imagine what it would be like if you had a big pot on a stove and it was full of water, and the water's boiling, and the stovetop, the burner is still on, and the steam starts building, and the cover to the pot starts rattling, right, with the steam. And so you go over there, and first you just set your hand on top of it. But then the more the pressure becomes, the more you have to kind of weight it with your hand to keep the lid on, right? And it takes more and more energy to keep the lid on it as the steam is building and the heat continues to create more steam. And eventually there's more steam than you have strength to hold the lid on, and for some people that's when they explode.
Yeah, I agree with that. So you have mentioned that therapy is about rewriting stories, not just expressing or telling them. So how do our stories influence the way we handle tough emotions?
Our stories influence so much about how we perceive and make sense of all of our emotions, right? Not just anger or the sort of feelings that lead to explosiveness. And when we think about our story, the stories themselves can create anger. In the same way that when you watch a movie and it elicits feelings for you, maybe it's a feeling of joy, maybe it's a feeling of sadness, maybe it's a feeling of grief, the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are and the meanings that we have made out of what has happened to us or what we've seen and heard or has gone on around us, in the same way as when we watch a movie, which is a story, right,
Yeah.
is going to elicit deep feelings in us, deep feelings in us. And some of those feelings are huge, and some of them are frightening, and some of them are overwhelming. And so an awareness of these multiple storylines that we are all carrying and sort of referring to as a basis of authority and explanation for how things are or why things are the way they are at any given point in time. It's really important in the same way that if every time you needed to interpret something that happened, you reached up onto a shelf and pulled down a book, which is a storyline, right? And it was a horror story, that's going to, if that's your interpretive framework, that's going to influence your takeaway, right? From that data point, that's going to influence how you see anything that happens to you. If your baseline is a horror story, or if your baseline is a wonderful story, right? It can be any of these storylines. But what I'm saying is that the stories we carry have significant implications for how we interpret the world around us and our experience. And that's why they matter so deeply at any given time. It's not just how we've explained the past to ourselves or how we explain the present to ourselves. It's a moment by moment interpretive framework that has tremendous power to change our emotional landscapes at any given moment for the constructive or the destructive.
Correct. That's correct. That makes sense. So now another question on the flip side. Some people believe that stuffing emotions is the key to staying composed in a high stress situation. So is there ever a time when suppressing emotions can actually be helpful?
Well, I think one of the things that's helpful to think about is what exactly do we mean by suppressing or stuffing or experiencing? And I think that's a really helpful place to start. Usually, when people sort of refer to, well, it can be helpful to stuff it in some circumstances, right? What they actually mean has nothing to do with feelings or stuffing feelings. It has to do with how you're acting, right? Which is a completely separate issue. Because every adult I know, now whether we do this at any given time or not is a different story, but every adult I know is perfectly capable of feeling one way and presenting another. So let me give you an example. Certainly, when most of us get pulled over for a speeding ticket or get pulled over by a police officer while driving for any reason, we got some kind of feelings about that, right? Irritability, anticipation. If your license plate is expired, maybe anxiety. If you're insurance, you don't have your insurance card, you forgot your wallet. You could have all kinds of feelings about that, right? If you're late, you could have some tremendous feelings about this. And no matter how irritated you are in that moment, most people are pretty good at being polite to police officers when they've been pulled over, no matter how agitated they are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so this has nothing to do with stuffing a feeling. What it has to do with is deciding how you're going to broadcast or not that feeling to the rest of the galaxy, which is a completely different story than stuffing it. And I think where most of us get a little stuck is in this idea that if you're polite to the police officer, you're pretending you're not annoyed. That's not true. He knows you're annoyed. You both know you're annoyed. Nobody doesn't think you're not annoyed, but that has nothing to do with being polite. And so, people get stuck in a little bit of a feedback loop where they say like, well, it's really important to be authentic and it's really important to be honest, and you can't do that and be calm. And that's nonsense. And there's also a difference between, understanding that being constructive, if you brought up the example of sitting in a meeting, perhaps, I think, and, being aggravated, it's okay to feel your feelings and acknowledge that maybe it's not the time or place to articulate your feelings. Now, not articulating them doesn't have anything to do with not having them. Right? So we've made this unfortunate sort of conflation of, in order to not act badly, I need to have all nice feelings all the time. And if I have a feeling that's not nice, but I still want to act right, I have to stuff it. And that's just simply not true. I mean, I think a great example is for anybody who is a parent or an aunt or an uncle or has children in their life. There are moments when you have intense feelings, right? And you know that because of your values, you're not going to articulate those feelings. You're going to smile and you're going to say, okay, don't worry about the paint on the carpet walls, whatever it is. It's okay. We can clean it up as you clench your jaw. Yeah. It's not that you're not feeling your feelings. It's that you've made a decision that articulating those feelings or acting out those feelings or projecting those feelings, injecting those feelings into the situation is not helpful. But that doesn't mean you're not having them or feeling them. I don't know about you, but I'm perfectly capable of standing in a line, for example, and being very, very irritated about how long the line is taking, but continuing to be perfectly polite to everybody else in the line. I can do that. It's no problem. It doesn't mean that I'm not irritated or that I'm pretending to myself that I'm not irritated. It means that I'm taking the position that, yeah, I'm irritated, I'm late, I'm annoyed, any one of a number of combination of things. And I don't have to show up like that. And I can keep my feelings and still show up in a way that makes me feel good about how I showed up.
More of a mindful expressive.
Yes. And specifically what we would call an ACT perspective. ACT stands for acceptance and commitment therapy. And one of the many interesting things that ACT revolves around is this idea that there's no reason you can't have a set of feelings about something and then also at the same time act in accordance with your values as opposed to the feelings.
Wow. Those were some great examples. It became so much clearer. Great. Well explained, Lindsay. So in your workshops, you teach a 3-minute stress management tool. So would you like to recommend to our listeners, any one of those steps, any practical tool?
Sure. Well, what I'd like to do actually is say something a little more general, if I may, about stress management and about 3 and 2-minute techniques. We live in a culture that promotes the idea of go big or go home. We live in a culture that promotes the idea that stress management or self-care means you need to find 90 minutes to drive yourself to a yoga class, change, take the yoga class, shower, go back to work, et cetera, that you need to find 60 minutes to work out, that you need these vast amounts of resources, and also that if it doesn't have a Strava category or look good on an Instagram photo, it didn't count, right? Unless you have a picture of yourself meditating under the lotus tree, right? Then it's not stress management. And I think that's a very dangerous and toxic myth. It encourages people to feel very deflated about what they can do because everything seems not enough. Well, shoot, I'm a parent, I'm an adult, I work, I care for people, any one of a number of things. I can't pull off 60 minutes. Shoot, I can't pull off 30 minutes. And so people get very disheartened very quickly because there's this pervasive cultural attitude that says it has to look like this in order for it to be effective. And this is a certain quantity and quality. And I can't emphasize enough how untrue that is, that if you can find 60 minutes to 60 minutes, I just said 60 minutes, which is an hour, 60 seconds, if you can find 60 seconds to stop and breathe, if you can find 2 minutes to stop and breathe, it'll do you a world of good. It'll do you a world of good. I was absolutely mesmerized the first time I was talking to somebody about stress something, and they said to me, oh yeah, I got this thing on my Apple Watch. And I said, what thing? And they showed me the thing on the Apple Watch, and it was this little graphic of a lotus flower expanding and contracting, and it was a breathing exercise. And the idea was you would inhale as the picture went the one way and exhale as it went the other way. And I said, that's incredible. that right there is worth an Apple Watch itself. Like, even if it did nothing else but that would be worth it. And I remember this person kind of said, like, oh, I don't know, seems kind of dumb. Like, there was this great dismissiveness because it was just this dumb thing the Apple Watch did, right? It didn't look good. It was too simple. And I was really saddened by that, because if I could get the people in my life to do 60 seconds of the Apple Watch exercise twice a day, their lives would be changed. And so when it comes to doing things for self-care and stress management, the most practical, tactical thing any of us can do is get out of this mindset that I have to have 20 or 30 or 40 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, and I have to go to a class, and it has to have scented candles and a certain kind of music and an outfit and this, that, and the other. If you can get 2 minutes to step outside into the outdoors and smell the grass, it's going to do you wonders. That's a type of mindfulness, is simply to notice what's going on with your senses, right? Touch, taste, sight, sound, smell.
Yep.
2 minutes is plenty. And so whatever the activity is, if you can stand up from your desk and do 2 minutes of gentle stretching, or 2 minutes of walking around, or 2 minutes of yoga out in the hall where nobody's around, you will find it transformative.
Yes.
And that's really the practical, tactical part, right? Is pushing back on this idea that it's got to look like something specific, and it's got to be a certain length of time, and you have to be able to record it on Strava.
That sounds effective. Wow. So before we wrap up, Lindsay, for someone feeling stuck in an emotional rut, what's the first step to unpacking those feelings and then rewriting their emotional story?
I think wanting something different from yourself, for yourself, and accepting the idea that change is probably closer than you think is a wonderful first step. And I like to encourage everybody to really think boldly for themselves about what they would like to have be different. How would you like things to be different? Whether that's your internal world or your external world or both. What do you want? Don't be afraid to want something different. That's great. You should have something different if you can see something different being better for you. And I think sort of getting assertive about that idea, like, yes, I would like something to be different, is a really helpful first step. And after that, I think professional help is tremendously helpful. I love, one of my great joys is helping people understand that there are so many kinds of therapists in the world. There's so many kinds of therapy. And when you find somebody who's licensed and experienced and does what we call evidence-based work, which means that the modality, the therapy, has been tested and shown to be clinically effective in double-blind studies, these sorts of things, the possibilities for therapy are so endless and so good. And I encourage anybody who is even remotely curious about some internal, external change to interview people, interview professionals. See, you don't have to be super knowledgeable about what all these different things mean, but talk to professionals and see if they sound like they get it. That's all you need to know. Do they sound like they get your situation? And do they sound like they get you? That's a good start. Make sure they're licensed. Don't work with unlicensed folks. And, if someone isn't your exact cup of tea, just move on. Just move on to the next one. No harm, no foul. You do not need to justify that. You need to find a therapist or a professional who's a good fit for you. And you don't have to explain that to anybody else, including the person that you don't want to work with. It's none of their business, quite frankly. So don't be afraid to ask for help. There's a lot of different kinds of help out there. Really effective evidence-based therapies that have been very well researched and proven to be effective, and some of which are very brief models. Some folks are a little reticent to seek professional help because it sounds like a really long time investment. And it doesn't have to be that at all. There are models, solutions focused brief therapy, SFBT, tends to be in the realm of 12 sessions, something like that. There are some that are shorter, there are some that are longer. But ultimately, don't be afraid to want the change that you want and to find people who can help you get it. You should have it.
Lovely, lovely. What a conclusion, Lindsay. And if our listeners, they want to get in touch with you and explore more about, how they can navigate through their emotional journey, how they can do that.
I'm certainly findable on my website at onwardpsychservices.com, which is onwardpsych, P-S-Y-C-H, services.com. I have a phone number that people can call. It's 720-362-8164. I love hearing from people. If you find me on Instagram at Lindsay Carnick or Onward Psych Services, I think it's Onward Psych Services, actually. Every Wednesday, I release a really fun little video that has a practical, tactical coping skill in it. And they're tons of fun. I love sharing those with people. I'd be happy to send you, Sana, some links and you can post them if you'd like. And I'm available.
Lovely, lovely. We'll have all the details mentioned in the show notes for our listeners. And Lindsay, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, humor, and practical tools for navigating our emotional landscapes and for this wonderful and thought-provoking conversation.
My absolute pleasure.
Listeners, if today's episode resonated with you, be sure to check out Lindsay's work at Onward Psychological Services and explore the transformative power of rewriting your story. You can refer the show notes along with this episode. And as always, thank you to all of you for tuning into the Mindful Living podcast. If you enjoyed this one, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. It truly helps us bring more inspiring guests like Lindsay to the show. And remember, life is all about progress, not perfection. Until next time, I am Sana, encouraging you to live mindfully, feel deeply, and rewrite the stories that no longer serve you. Take care and see you soon.